Hi there, it's Mr. Neil. In this video we're going to look at the website task from the 2022 Higher Computing Science assignment. By the end of this video you should know what the Higher Computing Science assignment involves and feel comfortable with undertaking the website task within the assignment. In 2022 the website task was broken into two parts, totaling 15 marks. So let's dive straight in and look at part A. In part A we had to do two tasks. We had to analyse the problem and then partly design a solution. So let's have a look at the problem. West Fife Walkers is a group of friends who like to walk in Scotland. The group has decided to offer walking tours of the woodlands close to their homes. West Fife Walkers starts a discussion on social media to identify the preferences of the local communities for tours. Following the feedback opposite, West Fife Walkers decide to go ahead with organising walking tours. A local web developer is offered to create the website that provides information about the tours and walks. So in task 3A, the web developer wants to draw an initial wireframe design for the website. Using the information and questions posted in social media, which we've got here for you, we have to create two end-user requirements and one functional requirement that could be given to the developer. So before we dive into this task, it's important to remember what we mean by end user and functional requirements in terms of websites. So end user requirements are what the user wants to do with the website. And functional requirements are what we as the developer must do to fulfill those end user requirements. Pause the video now and see if you can identify the end user and functional requirements for this program. I'm going to start by looking at the end user requirements. And before I write my answer down, I'm actually going to go through the statement there and highlight the key end user requirements as I see them. So we can see the points there that I've highlighted. KH wants maps so that they can follow the tours on their own and they're happy to pay for those maps. AN would like to learn more about wildlife. CC has seen other sites with maps and details directions. GT, SW and MP are looking for short walks. And JK would like to be able to book a tour online. From the key information highlighted, you may have come up with end user requirements that are along these lines. The user wants to be able to read information about woodland walks, including the length of the walk and the rating. The user wants to be able to buy maps with directions. They want to get information about local wildlife and they want to book walking tours online. Now, as this question is only worth 2 marks, you're only required to put 2 end user requirements in. If you put additional end user requirements in, you won't gain any additional marks. From these end user requirements, we then need to identify what we as the developer need to do to make that website work. So in order to get the mark here, we only have to provide one functional requirement. Here's some that I've come up with. We as the developer need to make sure there's an order form for the user to buy maps. We need to make sure there's a form for the user to book walking tours. We need to ensure that there's a nav bar so the user can move between pages. We need to ensure that there are formatted web pages displaying information, maps and images of each walk. Now that we've determined what the website must do, let's move on to the next task. Before we get into the next task, we are provided with a completed version of the West Fife Walkers website. You can access a copy of this website on REPL using the link on screen. Let's head over to REPL and have a look at the West Fife Walkers website as it currently is. Here we are on the home page for the West Fife Walkers. Got a wee bit of JavaScript there by the looks of it. We've got the Dean page. With all the information about, we've got 3 different walks there. The developer page, very similar to the Dean page, but only with 2 walks. We've got Balgownie with 1 walk, and then we have got the tours page, which has got a form in there as well. Moving now on to task 3B. The web developer has asked West Fife Walkers for feedback on the website. And we've received some feedback on the Dean.html page. We've been told that the page is too long. And in order to see the information about walk 2 and walk 3, the user is required to scroll down. Loads of people agree with this, but they cannot think of how it can improve without making the maps too small. So we've been asked to complete a wireframe design showing how this page can be redesigned so that the user can view the information and map for each walk, one walk at a time, on the same web page. We need to make sure that we annotate our design and describe any actions. Pause the video now and have a wee think what your wireframe is going to look like. So here we have my wireframe for the Dean page. We've got the two main elements at the top of the page that were already there. I've then added in these buttons, links, text for each of the three walks. And we can see that only walk 1 is appearing on the page. Now, I might get some marks for this, but I might not, because I've not annotated the design or described any actions. So let's add in our annotations and descriptions. So we've got a wee annotation to say that when the user clicks on 1, the content appears. And we can add in a further description of how this will work. When the page first loads, the information about all walks will be hidden. When the user clicks on walk 1, the information and map for this walk will appear. The same will happen for walk 2 and walk 3. Only one walk will appear at once, and then I've given an indication of how this is going to be implemented and stating that we're going to need JavaScript. Now that we've completed part A, we will hand that to our teacher and move on to part B. In part B, we're required to implement different aspects of the website. You'll notice that task 3C refers to JavaScript. Task 3D is about CSS. You'll know from doing higher computing science that one of the other aspects of website design and development is HTML forms. You'll notice that in 2022, candidates were not required to implement an HTML form. That doesn't mean the year that you do your coursework, you won't have to do it, as the SQE change what's required each year. In part B, we're also required to do some testing and some evaluation. Let's have a look at part 3C. Using the designs opposite, edit the dean.html file and the styles.css file. So in part A, we designed our own solution for the Dean page. We have now been given a solution that we must implement for the Dean page. And it's essentially what we came up with before. We've got links for each of the three walks, and only one walk will appear at a time. It is important that when we move into implementing this task, that we implement it as per this wireframe. So when the mouse passes over each heading, it reveals the appropriate section. Section element 1 of 3, only one which will be visible at any one time. Page 1 should be default. So let's head over to REPL and implement this design for dean.html. Here we are in REPL with the dean.html code in front of us, and off to the right here I've just got the wireframe so that I can refer to it. So the first aspect that we are going to go and do is we're going to add in the links or the text. It says walk 1, walk 2, walk 3. And it says that they're heading 3s. So I'm going to go in and add in a series of H3s below the information for each walk. So H3, walk 1, H3, walk 2, and H3, walk 3. And if we bring up the website and go to the Dean page, you can now see we've got these walk 1, walk 2s, and walk 3s. The design kind of shows them all next to each other. So I'm going to add some CSS that kind of moves them around. And I'm going to do this fairly quickly. I'm just going to do it as internal CSS because it only applies to this page. We're going to say H3. I'm going to say display and line. And I'm just going to add a bit of padding round about them so that they look a wee bit nicer. We refresh the page. And there we've got each of the three headings, one after the other. So we're now going to look at the walks. So we've got 3 sections here, and each of these 3 sections is a walk. So to make it clear what each one is, I'm just going to give each section a name using an ID. So we've got walk 1, we have got walk 2, and lastly walk 3. Passing the mouse over each heading reveals the appropriate section below. Section element 1 of 3, only one of which will be visible at any one point. The page should default to walk 1. So when the page loads at the moment, each of our 3 walks should be seen. So we want it to default to walk 1. So I'm going to add some CSS that will say that walk 2 and walk 3 are not visible. So we're going to use the display none property. And we're just going to do this inline CSS scenes. We're here, display none. I'm going to copy that and we're going to paste that in. So now when we look at the page, if we refresh it, only walk 1 is present. So we're now going to add the interactivity, the JavaScript, that will make each walk appear in turn. Now because walk 1 is the default and it will always load, I'm actually going to try and make walk 2 appear. So in order to do that, we're going to have to add some JavaScript functions. So I'm going to go up into the head of my document and I'm going to add in my script tag to say this is where I'm going to put my JavaScript. I'm going to give this function a name and I'm going to call it show it walk 2. It's going to need no parameters to work. And what do we want to do for show walk 2? Well, the first thing is we want to make sure that walk 2, which is defaulted to as display none, appears. Walk 2 is inside the section with the ID walk 2. So we can use the document.getElementById method to access that portion of the code. So I'm going to go into my function, and for speed I have pre-typed that and I'm going to stick it in. So document.getElementById, it's the element that has got the ID of walk 2. And what do we want to do with that element? Well, we want to change how it is styled, and specifically we want to change how it is displayed, and we want to set it to block. As well as showing the walk 2, we want to hide walk 1. So we're going to use the same code, document.getElementById. We're going to change it to walk 1. And we're going to say style.display equals none. And so is that there is only one walk on the screen at the same time, we're also going to go and block element 3 to make sure if we've seen element 3, we now no longer see it. So we'll say document.getElementById walk 3 style.display none. So this is the name of the function. We now need to run this function. So I'm going to copy the function name to save me having to type in it. And I'm going to go down to my heading that contains my walk 2. And this is where I'm going to put my function call. We're told that passing the mouse over each heading reveals appropriate section. So off our JavaScript events, we have got an on mouse over, an on mouse out, or an on click. So because we're passing the mouse over, we're going to use our on mouse over function. So I'm going to go on mouse over equals, and then put in the name of the function as we have copied it. So if we give that a wee run, load up the page, and we move over walk 2, you can see the content of the page now changes to walk 2. If we go over walk 1 and walk 3, nothing happens. But we have now got the foundations that we can take to use it. So I'm going to take this function, show walk 2, and I'm going to change it, and I'm going to change it to show walk 3. So what do we want to happen? Well, we want to set the walk 3 element to display block, and we want to set the walk 1 elements and the walk 2 elements to display none. We're now going to go down to the heading 3 that contains walk 3, and I'm going to copy the on mouse over from the previous heading and paste it in. And I'm going to change it from show walk 2 to show walk 3. If we now look at the page, we start on walk 1, I go to walk 2, I get the information about walk 2, and I go to walk 3, I get the information about walk 3. We now need to get the code so that walk 1 will appear again. So I'm going to go back to my project, I'm going to go up and I'm going to copy the code for show walk 2. And I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to change the name of it to show walk 1. And we want walk 1 to display block and walks 2 and 3 to display none. And now we can go down, copy the code that we've got, add it to our heading for walk 1 and change it to be show walk 1. And one last look at the page. Walk 2, walk 3, back to walk 1, and you can see that as we move the mouse over each one, it changes. So if we look at our website and look at the design, we have successfully implemented the design, therefore we have completed task 3C. Moving now on to task 3D. West Five Walkers would like to add a gallery page to the website, showing photographs of each wood along with a description of each photograph. Create a new web page for the website and implement the wireframe shown opposite. So here we've got a wireframe for what the pages looks like. We've got some text on the left and images on the right, some text on the right and images on the left, and then a duplication of what we've got here. So we're going to have to use some CSS to modify the horizontal and vertical positioning of the content on this page. Let's head over to REPL and implement the designs for Gallery.html. So here we are ready for task 3D. And task 3D requires us to create a gallery page and add the content. To create the gallery page, I'm going to duplicate one of the other pages and then remove all the content from the main tag within that page. So what we have is we have got heading 1, and then we have got 3 sections. And then within each section we have got an H2, a paragraph and an image. So I'm going to go and do that off camera, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what we have. You could always work on it as well and come back and see if we agree with each other. So here we have my gallery page with all the content that we're required to have on it. Let me show you how I have achieved this. I've added in 3 sections, and in each section I've got an H2 for the name of the walk, the wee description that we're provided, and the image. I've also added in CSS, that means the images are the specified size of 250, 190, and I've used a descendant selector for this. I've said all images inside the main tag should be 250 by 190. So let's now start to move the content into the different places. I actually need to add into each section a wee div because our text is all together. So I'm just going to add into each section a div around the text. In order to move the position of the text within these divs and the images, we're going to have to identify them using classes. So I'm just going to go down through each div and either name it text left or text right. I'm going to go to each image and either rename it image left or image right, and that is what we will use to apply our CSS to. So the first one is going to be text left and image right. Within our CSS, we're going to need rules for each of those elements. So let's go and write in the rules for each of those elements. So we're going to have a class called text left, and we're also going to have a class called text right. We're going to have a class called image left, and a class called image right. So let's have a wee look at our page and see how we're going to achieve these different things. Now I'm using Google Chrome, and one of the features that may be available to within your Google Chrome is the feature called Inspect. And this allows me to see, as I hover over different portions of the web page, how it is going to be structured. So if I hover over the section, I can see all the information within that section. If I hold over the div, I can see all the information within that div, and I can also see the image. So the first thing we need to look at that div is it's taking up the full width of the page. And really we only want it to take up the width it needs. So we're going to go to our HTML and we're going to set text left. We want it to display in line. And that means it should only take up the width it needs. Let's have a look, we'll see what happens. So we can now see that actually as I go over text left, it's actually no longer just highlighting the text as we would see with the other one, it's highlighting the whole section. So that seems to work. Let's now get the image to float to the right. So image right, float right. And let's see what that does. So our image is now gone over to the right hand side. But what's happening is that the Blair Gowney text is jumping up. So in order to stop this from happening, we need to prevent each of our three sections from interfering with each other. So to do that, we're going to write a rule that says section clear both. And this will stop the sections interfering with each other. And now we no longer have any of the sections interfering with each other. Still focusing on this one here, our div is still taking up more space than it needs. The image is floated right. Let's get the text to float left, just to set we really want you to be left. So float left. And let's update the page. There we go. So our Dean as is required matches. Now so should the Deville section because it's exactly the same. So let's go and have a look and see why Deville is not working. Because I've put the class in there as text right instead of image right. Okay, so Deville is now working. We'll come on to the fact that it doesn't have the light green background in a second or two. So let's now go on to Blair Gowney and we should have a rough idea of what we want to do. We want the text to display in line. And this time, instead of floating left, we would like it to float right. And the image, instead of floating right, we'd like it to float left. Let's see if this achieves what we want it to achieve. Yes, the Blair Gowney is now with image on the left, the text on the right. Now, because we have been doing some displaying and some floating, essentially what happens is the browser loses track of how tall the body should be. So to ensure that we have the light green section around the whole main, we're going to add in a rule that gives our main a height. So we now have a light green background around the whole page. The developer section is still not right. And the reason for that is yes, it is displaying line, and yes, it is only taking up the width that it needs. But we can see here that the sentence describing developer is slightly longer than Dean. So to get the image and the text in line, we're going to have to set a width to that div. So I'm going to add a width to the text of 400 pixels. And now when you look at the page, we can see that the text and the image are in line with each other as per the wireframe for task 3D. So there we have now completed task 3D. Moving on to task 3, part 1. The tours page contains a form that walkers can complete to book a place on a tour. Walkers are instructed to complete the form once, after which West Fife walkers will organise all walks for the summer. Describe how the input of wood selection and number of friends form elements could be comprehensively tested. So let's go and have a look at the form. Here we go, here is the form. Please complete the form below to apply for places for summer walks. Note that only one form can be submitted per person. You may bring a maximum of 5 friends with you on each walk. When the walkers have been set up, you will be contacted via email. Now we have been asked to test how the wood selection would work. Now, given the fact that we're allowed to select woods, to comprehensively test it, we need to make sure we can submit the form with one wood and with multiple woods, and make sure we can select multiple woods. So that would work. Entering the number of friends to visit, we would need to test it with a range of different data. So for example, we would need to test it with exceptional test data, data that the program doesn't expect. So if I wanted to go with -1, am I allowed to submit that? Well, it looks like I am. So in order to comprehensively test the form in terms of wood selection, the user should see if it is possible to submit with one wood selected and then multiple woods selected. They should also see if it's possible to submit the form with no woods. To test the number of friends, the user should use a variety of test data. They should use exceptional test data, data that is not allowed. You've seen me try -1 and 7. This should be rejected. Normal data, so 4, data that's allowed. Extreme data, the minimum and maximum, in this case 0 and 5. And our normal and our extreme test data should be accepted. Now, the results of this testing as we tried it may help us with part 2. We need to state one reason why the form is not fit for purpose. So let's go back and have a look at the form again. So I have got 8 people wanting to join me. I can submit that and it's entered. That should not be allowed. So the form is not fit for purpose because there is no validation to ensure that only between 0 and 5 friends have submitted. If I take this version of the form, I've not selected any wood. I could submit the form. So the form is not fit for purpose because it is possible for the user to submit the form without any wood being selected. We're also told that when the walks have been set up, you'll be contacted via your email address. I've submitted this form without entering an email address. So therefore the form is not fit for purpose because it does not insist on an email that's been present. Let's have a look at a summary of these points that I've just mentioned. So we're required only to provide one reason why the form is not fit for purpose. On the screen I've got 3 main reasons. And then something that's technically outside the scope of the higher course, but we are told walkers are instructed to complete the form once. So there is no control that ensures that walkers only completes the form once. So if you provided an answer that's one of those bullet points, it's very likely that you will have got the marks for this task. In this video, I've taken you through the website task from the 2022 Higher Computing Science assignment, and we've looked at each of the aspects within this assignment. Now remember that not all elements of the website design and development unit have been assessed in this task, and that doesn't mean in the assignment that you do. Hopefully you're feeling a little bit more confident about the website design and development task within the assignment, and I would encourage you now to go onto the SKA website and have an attempt of one of the previous assignments available within their past paper section.